Welcome to Myth and Moonlight, where stories carry you into peaceful slumber. I'm Elara, your guide on this journey to rest. Tonight we'll wander through the elegant halls and enchanted gardens of a faraway kingdom, where a princess embarks on a gentle quest of self-discovery. As you listen to my voice, know that this time belongs entirely to you, a precious gift of calm in your day. Our story tonight explores how sometimes we must become quiet to hear the whispers of our true selves. What appears to be lost might simply be waiting to be rediscovered in unexpected places. The tale that unfolds will take you through misty gardens and quiet libraries, along peaceful streams and into hushed forests. Each setting offers a new layer of tranquility, inviting you to sink deeper into comfort. While our princess searches for something precious, you'll be guided toward something equally valuable: deep restorative rest. There's a gentle wisdom in learning to release our grip on certainty, in allowing ourselves to explore the questions rather than demanding immediate answers. Our story tonight honors this patient approach to understanding ourselves, giving permission for discovery to unfold at its own perfect pace. So make yourself comfortable now. Adjust your position if needed, and allow your body to be fully supported. As I begin to speak, you need only listen and breathe. The journey to sleep has already begun, and all is well. I'd like to invite you now to settle more deeply into comfort. Perhaps shift your position slightly to ensure your body feels completely supported. Notice the places where you make contact with the surface beneath you, how it holds you securely, requiring no effort on your part. Have you ever noticed how we sometimes lose track of the simplest, most essential aspects of ourselves when life grows busy or challenging? Like our princess tonight, we might feel we've misplaced something fundamental, only to discover it was never truly gone. This universal experience of reconnecting with our core self awaits us all when we create the space for gentle rediscovery. Let's begin by allowing your body to release any unnecessary tension it might be holding. Starting with your feet, notice any tightness in your toes, the arches of your feet, or your ankles. As you become aware of these areas, invite them to soften and relax. The muscles can unwind, creating a pleasant sensation of release. This relaxation flows upward into your calves, allowing them to become heavy and comfortable. Your knees can release any subtle holding, the thigh muscles melting into deeper rest. Feel this wave of relaxation continuing through your hips and lower back, places that often carry tension without our awareness. As these areas soften, notice how your breathing might naturally deepen. Your abdomen can rise and fall with each breath, free from constriction. The relaxation spreads through your middle, back, upper back, and shoulders. These strong muscles that work so hard throughout your day can now enjoy complete rest. Thus, sensation continues into your arms, flowing like warm honey through your upper arms, elbows, forearms, wrists, and finally reaching your hands and fingers. Any lingering tightness dissolves, replaced by pleasant heaviness and warmth. Now bring your awareness to your breathing without trying to change it in any way. Simply notice the natural rhythm that sustains you effortlessly. Feel the gentle expansion as you inhale, the quiet release as you exhale. With each breath, a little more tension can melt away. Your breathing continues at its own perfect pace, bringing fresh energy in, carrying any remaining tension out. As as you breathe, begin to imagine yourself in a place of extraordinary beauty and peace. You're walking along a smooth stone path that winds through royal gardens. The evening air is perfectly mild, neither warm nor cool, embracing you in its gentle presence. Overhead, the sky displays soft watercolour hues of lavender and rose as twilight settles over the kingdom. The last golden rays of sunlight filter through tall, ancient trees, creating patterns of light and shadow on the path before you. As you follow this path, you begin to notice the sounds around you. From a distance comes the soft, melodic flow of a fountain, water spilling from one basin to another in a continuous, soothing rhythm. Closer by, you might hear the gentle rustling of leaves as an evening breeze passes through the garden. Occasionally, the sweet notes of birdsong reach your ears, unhurried, peaceful calls as the birds settle for the night. Your body feels wonderfully at ease as you walk. Each step along the path is effortless, as though the ground itself rises slightly to meet your feet. Your shoulders are relaxed, your arms swinging gently at your sides. The air feels pleasantly supportive, almost like moving through silk. With each step, you can feel a subtle release through your entire body, a letting go that increases your sense of lightness and ease. The garden around you offers delicate scents that shift and blend as you move forward. There's the sweet freshness of roses, the earthy richness of cypress trees, the clean brightness of lemon blossoms, and beneath it all, the subtle mineral scent of the stone path, warmed by the day's sunshine and now releasing that warmth into the evening air. If you pause to take a deeper breath, you might taste the slight sweetness in the air, reminiscent of honey and summer fruits. As we prepare to enter our story, consider how often the things we seek are already within our reach, waiting patiently for us to become quiet enough to notice them. Like a name that seems forgotten, yet lives in the heart. Sometimes our deepest truths are not lost, but simply resting quietly, awaiting our gentle attention. You're exactly where you need to be in this moment. Your body knows how to find rest, and your mind is allowed to slow its busy pace. All responsibilities and concerns can be set aside for now, creating space for peace and renewal. You have complete permission to enjoy this journey into relaxation and eventually into sleep. Now, as the path continues onward, let's follow it into our story, where a princess awakens to discover something precious has gone missing, beginning a gentle journey of rediscovery in the peaceful kingdom of King Albasca. In the heart of the kingdom of Albasca stood a magnificent palace of white stone and soaring towers. Sunrise painted these towers with hues of gold and amber each morning, a crown of light upon the peaceful realm. The kingdom was known throughout distant lands for its vast libraries, fragrant gardens, and the wisdom of its kind ruler, King Albasca. But most beloved in the kingdom was the king's daughter, a princess with eyes the colour of summer twilight, carrying the same thoughtful depth. Her hair fell in soft waves, the colour of chestnuts in autumn, sometimes gathered elegantly when she attended royal functions, but more often flowing freely when she wandered through her favourite places in the palace grounds. She wore dresses of simple elegance rather than ostentatious finery, preferring comfort and ease of movement to rigid formality. Her favourite was a gown of deep blue silk that mirrored the evening sky, embroidered with tiny silver stars along its flowing sleeves. The princess had a gentle simple observations sound like poetry. Her laughter, though not frequently heard, was genuine and warm when it came, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She had grown up under the loving guidance of her father, who had raised her alone after the queen had passed away when the princess was still very young. The king had ensured his daughter received an education encompassing not only traditional royal studies, but also the arts, sciences, philosophy, and the practical wisdom of tending gardens and understanding the needs of the kingdom's people. The palace itself was a place of serene beauty. Arched windows captured views of distant mountains and lush valleys. Corridors were lined with tapestries depicting the kingdom's peaceful history, and courtyards featured fountains where water played gentle, continuous melodies. The great hall, where the king sometimes held audiences, had ceilings supported by graceful columns, though it was more often used for seasonal celebrations than matters of state in this peaceful realm. In the quieter eastern wing of the palace lay the princess's private chambers, featuring a sitting room with comfortable cushioned window seats overlooking the royal gardens. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes she had collected over the years, tales of distant lands, treatises on natural philosophy, and books of poetry from across the known world. A writing desk near the window held her journal, where she often recorded her thoughts and observations about the changing seasons and the small, beautiful moments that filled her days. The princess's life followed gentle rhythms that changed with the turning of the seasons. In winter, she spent more time in the palace libraries or beside the warm hearth in her chambers, reading and contemplating. Spring found her in the gardens more often, witnessing the first tender blooms and helping the royal gardeners with the delicate work of nurturing new growth. Summer days were for longer walks to the meadows beyond the palace walls, and autumn brought the harvest celebrations, where she enjoyed connecting with the kingdom's people as they gathered the year's bounty. Throughout these seasons, the princess found most comfort in moments of quiet contemplation, watching the play of light through stained glass windows, observing the patient work of spiders weaving webs between rose bushes, or listening to the subtle changes in birdsong as the day progressed from dawn to dusk. These small moments of awareness brought her a sense of belonging within the larger patterns of life in the kingdom. In the soft spaces between sleeping and waking, the princess sometimes felt a curious sensation, a question forming without words, a gentle wondering about something just beyond her understanding. It was not an unpleasant feeling, merely a quiet curiosity that would fade as the routines of the day began. Recently, this feeling had lingered a little longer each morning, like a forgotten dream, reluctant to release its hold on her mind. On this particular morning, silvery mist clung to the palace gardens, transforming familiar paths into mysterious landscapes. The princess awoke slowly, awareness returning gradually as the gentle light of dawn filtered through her bedroom curtains. She felt the soft weight of her blankets, the pleasant warmth that had built up during the night, and the subtle transition from the world of dreams to the waking world. As she lay there, eyes still closed, she noticed the distant calls of morning, birds, gentle, unhurried conversations between trees. The air held the crisp freshness that comes after a night of gentle rain, carrying the scent of wet stone and awakening flowers through her partially open window. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with this morning essence, allowing it to bring her further into wakefulness. When she finally opened her eyes, she gazed at the patterns of light on her ceiling, Soft, shifting diamonds as the rising sun played through the leaded glass of her windows. She stretched slowly, feeling the pleasant release in her muscles, the sensation of her body remembering itself after the stillness of sleep. It was in this quiet moment of transition that the princess first noticed something was different. Something familiar was missing. Something so fundamental that its absence created a curious hollow feeling, like a word on the tip of her tongue that refused to be spoken. She sat up slowly, looking around her chamber. Everything appeared to be in its place, her books neatly arranged on shelves, her shawl draped over a chair, her slippers waiting beside the bed. Yet the feeling persisted, a gentle but insistent awareness that something essential had slipped away during the night. The princess rose from her bed and moved to the window, drawing back the curtains to gaze out at the misty morning. The garden, paths below were half hidden in silvery fog, the familiar transformed into something dreamlike and new. Perhaps this was affecting her perception, this transformation of the known world into something temporarily mysterious. She went through her morning routine with careful attention, washing her face in the basin of cool water left by her lady's maid, brushing her long hair until it shone in the morning light, selecting a simple gown of pale green for the day ahead. Each action was performed with mindful presence, yet the strange feeling of something missing continued to hover at the edges of her awareness. As she pinned a small silver brooch to her dress, a gift from her father depicting a nightingale in flight, the princess suddenly realized what was missing. The revelation came not as a shock, but as a quiet understanding that settled gently into her consciousness. She could not remember her name. This knowledge should have frightened her, yet strangely it did not. Instead, she felt a mild curiosity, as though she had discovered an interesting puzzle rather than a disturbing absence. She knew who she was in all the ways that mattered. The king's daughter, a lover of books and gardens, a person who valued quietude and gentle observation. Yet a name, the simple word that had identified her throughout her life, had somehow slipped away during the night, like a boat untethered from its mooring. She sat at her dressing table, looking at her reflection in the mirror. The same face gazed back at her, twilight eyes, chestnut hair, the small birthmark near her left eyebrow shaped like a crescent moon. She was still herself, yet without the word that had always served as the entryway to her identity. How curious, she whispered to her reflection, her voice sounding just as it always had. I seem to have misplaced my name during the night. The princess considered whether she should be concerned by this development, yet no sense of alarm arose within her. Instead, she felt a gentle stirring of interest, even anticipation, as though this unusual circumstance might be the beginning of a journey rather than a predicament to be feared. She decided not to mention this discovery immediately. After all, what would she say? Good morning, father. I seem to have forgotten who I am, though I remember everything else perfectly well. No, such a statement would only cause unnecessary concern. Instead, she would observe, reflect, and perhaps discover where her name had gone, or why it had chosen to depart. There was no urgency, no danger, only a gentle mystery unfolding at its own pace. With this decision made, the princess finished, preparing for the day. She slipped her feet into soft leather shoes, took one last look at herself in the mirror, and opened her chamber door to step into the quiet corridor beyond, ready to begin this most unusual day in the kingdom of Albaska. The princess moved through the familiar corridors of the palace with unhurried steps, her hand occasionally trailing along the cool stone walls. Morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long rectangles of brightness across the marble floors. The usual sounds of palace life floated through the air. Distant conversations of servants going about their morning duties, the soft clinking of dishes being prepared for breakfast, the occasional call of a messenger hurrying from one wing to another. She paused at a window overlooking the central courtyard, where gardeners were already at work tending to the flowering shrubs and ancient trees. One elderly gardener was carefully pruning a rose bush, his weathered hands moving with gentle precision among the thorns and blossoms. Another younger assistant carried watering cans from the central fountain to the beds of lilies and lavender. The princess observed how they worked in comfortable silence, communicating with occasional nods or gestures rather than words. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted up from the kitchens below, mingling with the fragrance of the gardens. The princess closed her eyes for a moment, appreciating this blend of aromas that had been the backdrop to countless mornings in her life. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill her lungs, bringing with it these familiar scents of home. As she continued toward the breakfast room, the princess wondered how her unusual situation would unfold. Would someone address her by name? And would she recognize it when they did? Would the sound of it bring immediate recognition, like awakening from a strange dream? These questions floated lightly in her mind, creating curiosity rather than concern. The breakfast room was a pleasant chamber with wide windows facing east to catch the morning light. A round table of polished oak stood in the centre, set with simple but elegant porcelain and silver. King Albaska was already seated, reviewing some documents while sipping his morning tea. He looked up as she entered, his kind face brightening with a smile. "Good morning, my dear," he said warmly, setting aside his papers. "You look well rested. Did you sleep peacefully?" The princess returned his smile, taking her customary seat across from him. "Good morning, father. Yes, I slept very well, thank you." She noticed with interest that he hadn't addressed her by name, so her unusual circumstance remained untested for the moment. A servant appeared silently at her side, pouring tea into her cup. A fragrant blend of jasmine and orange blossom that had long been her favourite. The familiar aroma rose in a gentle steam, and she thanked the servant with a nod. "What plans do you have for today?" her father asked, as he spread a small amount of honey on a piece of warm bread. The princess considered this question as she added a drop of milk to her tea, watching it swirl and cloud the amber liquid. "I thought I might spend some time in the library this morning," she replied, "and perhaps visit the North Gardens in the afternoon. The rain last night will have refreshed everything." Her father nodded approvingly. The head librarian mentioned yesterday that some new volumes have arrived from the eastern provinces, collections of folk tales and natural histories. You might find them interesting. "That sounds perfect," she said, selecting a ripe peach from the fruit bowl. As she cut into its soft flesh, juice pooled on her plate, catching the light like tiny amber jewels. She took a small bite, enjoying the sweet, complex flavour that filled her mouth. Their breakfast continued with comfortable conversation about the affairs of the kingdom. The princess listened attentively as her father mentioned the progress of the new aqueduct being built to bring fresh water to the outlying villages, and the successful harvest of medicinal herbs from the royal greenhouses. These discussions of everyday matters felt reassuringly normal, a familiar framework around the unusual circumstance she was experiencing. Throughout their meal, the princess noticed surprised that her father did not once address her by name. Was this typical? She couldn't recall with certainty. Perhaps in the intimacy of family meals, names became unnecessary. They were simply father and daughter, needing no further identification. After breakfast, the king rose to attend to his duties, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead before departing. "Enjoy your day of reading and gardens," he said with a smile. "Perhaps we can take an evening walk together later, if the weather remains pleasant." "I'd like that very much," she replied, watching as he left the room, his royal robes making a soft swishing sound against the stone floor. Left alone, the princess finished her tea in thoughtful silence. The strange absence of her name continued to rest lightly in her awareness, neither growing nor diminishing. It was simply there, a curious space where something familiar had been. After breakfast, she made her way to the grand library of Albaska Palace, a magnificent space with ceilings so high they seemed to disappear into shadow. Tall windows allowed natural light to spill across the countless volumes arranged on shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. Wooden ladders on rails provided access to the highest shelves, and comfortable reading nooks were scattered throughout the vast room, creating spaces of intimate study within the grandeur. The head librarian, an elderly woman with silver hair, always arranged in a neat bun, looked up from her desk as the princess entered. Her eyes, magnified by round spectacles, brightened in recognition. "Good morning, Your Highness," she said, with a respectful nod. "Your father mentioned you might visit today. The new arrivals from the east have been placed on the display table in the north alcove." "Thank you," the princess replied, noticing again the absence of her name in the address. "Your Highness" was her title, not her name. The mystery remained intact. She made her way through the rows of bookshelves, breathing in the comforting scent of paper, leather, and the subtle dust that seemed to be the library's own perfume. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, creating pools of golden light on the polished wooden floors. The library was quiet at this hour, with only a few scholars at distant tables, bent over their studies in absorbed silence. Reaching the north alcove, she found the newly arrived books arranged on a display table. Their covers were bound in rich fabrics and leathers, some embossed with intricate designs that caught the light as she moved closer. She ran her fingers lightly over them, feeling the various textures: smooth leather, rough cloth, the slight indentations of embossed lettering. One volume in particular drew her attention, a collection of folk tales bound in deep blue cloth, with silver constellations embroidered across its cover. She lifted it carefully, feeling its substantial weight in her hands, and carried it to a nearby window seat where the morning light would illuminate the pages without straining her eyes. Settling into the cushioned seat, she opened the book, breathing in the scent of new paper and fresh ink. The title page was beautifully illustrated, with intertwining vines and flowers around the words: stories of name and nature, folk tales from the eastern valleys. The princess felt a small flutter of interest at the word name in the title. Perhaps this was not mere coincidence, but a gentle nudge toward understanding her situation. She turned to the table of contents and immediately noticed a story titled "The Girl Who Gave Away Her Name." Her heart quickened slightly as she found the corresponding page and began to read. The tale told of a young village girl who, tired of the expectations attached to her name and family history, traded her name to a river spirit in exchange for the freedom to choose her own path. For a time, she wandered nameless through the world, learning and growing growing without the weight of predetermined identity. Eventually, she found her true calling as a healer and returned to the river, where the spirit offered her name back. But the girl, now a woman, chose instead to create a new name that reflected who she had become rather than who she had been expected to be. The princess read this tale twice, considering its meaning in relation to her own experience. Had she somehow, without conscious intention, given away her name? Or had it simply slipped away because it no longer fit who she was becoming? These questions rested gently in her mind as she continued to explore the book, reading tales of transformations, journeys and discoveries, each offering subtle insights that might relate to her situation. The morning passed in peaceful reading, the quality of light shifting through the high windows as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Occasionally, the princess would pause to gaze out at the gardens below, watching the patterns of light and shadow move across the landscape as clouds drifted overhead. These moments of observation allowed the stories she read to settle more deeply into her understanding, creating connections beyond mere words on a page. By midday, she had read several tales that touched on themes of identity, naming, and self-discovery. Rather than providing a clear explanation for her experience, these stories opened possibilities, suggesting that the loss of her name might be the beginning of something, rather than merely an absence to be corrected. With this sense of gentle anticipation, the princess closed the book and rose from her window seat. She returned the volume to the display table, thinking she might come back to it tomorrow for further exploration. For now, she felt drawn to the gardens, where the afternoon light would be illuminating rain-washed blossoms and leaves with renewed clarity. As she left the library, she nodded farewell to the elderly librarian, who was now assisting a young scholar with locating a rare manuscript. The princess moved through the palace corridors with unhurried steps, passing servants and courtiers, who acknowledged her with respectful bows or curtsies. Each person she encountered addressed her as Your Highness or Princess, her title and role, but never her name. This continued absence might have been troubling, yet she found herself embracing the spaciousness it created within her identity. Without the specific designation of a name, she was experiencing herself more directly, as a being who observed, felt, thought and moved through the world with senses fully engaged. Perhaps this was a gift rather than a loss, this opportunity to experience herself anew, unbounded by familiar definition. With this thought warming her mind, she stepped through a side door of the palace and into the sunlit gardens beyond, ready to continue her day of gentle discovery in the peaceful kingdom of Albaska. The princess descended the smooth stone steps that led from the palace terrace down into the vast royal gardens. The rain from the previous night had left the world refreshed, colours more vibrant, scents more pronounced, the very air itself seemingly cleansed and renewed. Water droplets still clung to petals and leaves, catching the afternoon sunlight and transforming the garden into a landscape adorned with countless tiny jewels. She followed a winding path of pale gravel that curved between flower beds bursting with summer blossoms, roses in deep crimson and delicate pink, lavender releasing its soothing fragrance with each gentle breeze, bright yellow sunflowers turning their faces to follow the light across the sky. The path was damp enough from the rain that her footsteps made almost no sound, allowing her to move through the garden like a silent observer, part of the peaceful scene rather than disrupting it. The princess paused beside a stone bench nestled between between two flowering cherry trees, their blossoms mostly gone now, but their leaves creating a pleasant green canopy overhead. She sat down, arranging her pale green dress around her, and simply breathed for a moment, taking in the surrounding beauty with all her senses. The air carried multiple layers of fragrance, the sharp brightness of freshly cut grass from where the gardeners had been working, the sweet perfume of nearby roses, the earthy richness of wet soil, and the clean scent of water from a nearby fountain. She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing solely on these scents, noting how each one shifted and changed as the breeze moved around her. When she opened her eyes again, she noticed details she might otherwise have missed. A ladybug making its deliberate way up a blade of grass, the complex patterns of veins in a leaf that had fallen onto the bench beside her, the subtle variations of green in the foliage surrounding her position. This heightened awareness felt connected to her nameless state, as though the absence of this one defined aspect of herself had created space for a more immediate experience of the world. The princess lifted her face to feel the warm afternoon sunlight on her skin. It created a pleasant sensation of gentle heat, balanced by the cool breeze that occasionally passed through the garden. She was aware of the solid support of the bench beneath her, the soft fabric of her dress against her skin, the weight and position of her body in this moment and place. As she sat in this peaceful contemplation, the princess noticed an elderly gardener approaching along the path. He carried a small watering can and wore the simple brown garments typical of the palace gardening staff, though the quality of the fabric and the small gold leaf embroidered on his collar indicated his senior position. She recognised him as Master Thorn, the head gardener who had tended the royal gardens for as long as she could remember. "Good afternoon, Your Highness," he said, with a respectful nod as he came closer. His voice was gentle but clear, with the slight raspiness that often comes with advanced age. "It's a fine day after the rain, isn't it?" "Indeed it is, Master Thorn," she replied, smiling. "Everything seems so alive and vibrant." The old gardener's weathered face creased with pleasure at her observation. "Yes, that's the gift of rain. It reveals what was always there, just waiting for the right conditions to show itself fully." He gestured toward a nearby rose bush with particularly luminous white blossoms. "Take that albaska white there. Named after your father's coronation it was. Been growing here for 20 years, but never looks as perfect as it does after summer rain." The princess looked at the rose with renewed interest. "I didn't know it was named for my father's coronation," she said. "How wonderful to have living commemorations of important moments." Master Thorn nodded, his eyes taking on a distant quality as he recalled the past. "Oh yes, Your Highness. Gardens are full of stories and remembrances, if you know how to read them. Every plant here has a history. Some were gifts from foreign dignitaries, others developed right here by generations of royal gardeners. Each one carries its name and its story." "Its name and its story," the princess repeated softly, thinking of her own curious situation. "Master Thorn, do you believe a name contains power? That it somehow shapes what something, or someone, becomes?" The old gardener considered her question thoughtfully, leaning slightly on his watering can. "An interesting question, Your Highness. In the plant world, names often describe something essential. The night-blooming jasmine tells you when to expect its fragrance. The weeping willow shows you its nature in its very name." He paused, looking at her with wise, kind eyes. "But I've also seen plants produces the sweetest nectar, the fragile fern that survives the harshest winters. Perhaps names are just starting points, not final destinations. The princess nodded, appreciating his perspective. That's a beautiful way to think about it. Starting points, not final destinations. If I may ask, Your Highness, what brings you about such philosophical questions on this fine afternoon? Master Thorn's tone was respectful, but carried genuine interest. She considered how much to share of her unusual experience. This wise gardener, who had known her since she was a small child, running through these same gardens, might offer valuable insights. I've been thinking about identity today, she said carefully, about how we know who we are and how much of the knowing is tied to what we're called versus what we experience ourselves to be. Master Thorn nodded slowly. The questions that come with your time of life. Not a child anymore, but still discovering the full shape of your adulthood. He smiled gently. If an old gardener might offer a humble observation, I've watched you grow from a tiny seedling to the beautiful young woman before me now, through all your seasons, through changes in appearance and knowledge and responsibilities. There has been an essential quality that has remained constant, a truthfulness, a gentleness of spirit that no name could fully capture. His words moved her unexpectedly, bringing a slight warmth to her eyes. Thank you, Master Thorn. That's very kind. Not kindness, Your Highness. Just honest observation, the way I'd note the particular hue of a flower or the resilience of a tree. He gestured toward a small path branching off from the main one. If you're contemplating questions of names and nature today, you might enjoy visiting the Forgotten Garden. It's looking particularly fine after the rain, and it's a peaceful place for reflection. The Forgotten Garden? She asked, realizing she wasn't familiar with this name, despite having explored the palace grounds extensively throughout her life. Yes, it's a small enclosed garden beyond the North Fountain. It's called Forgotten because it was once overgrown and abandoned for many years, until your grandmother, the late Queen, had it restored. It contains plants that have no formal names in our botanical records, varieties that were either lost to time or perhaps never named at all. Just beautiful, growing things that exist without designation, yet are no less magnificent for it. He smiled. I tend it myself these days, as it requires a certain understanding of plants beyond their formal classifications. The princess felt a flutter of interest, almost excitement. A garden of unnamed plants seemed perfectly aligned with her current experience. I would very much like to see this garden, she said, rising from the bench. Follow the small path past the North Fountain and look for a wooden door set into the old stone wall. It's never locked, just waiting for someone who wishes to enter. Master Thorn bowed slightly. If you'll excuse me, Your Highness, I must continue my rounds before the evening dew falls. Of course, and thank you for the suggestion. The princess watched as the elderly gardener continued along the path, his movements unhurried yet purposeful, the watering can swinging gently at his side. She turned toward the north section of the gardens, following the main path until she reached the large fountain depicting sea creatures and mythical water beings. Water sprayed from the upturned tails of stone dolphins, creating a continuous, gentle music as it fell back into the circular basin below. The princess paused here for a moment, watching the play of water and light, before spotting the small side path Master Thorn had mentioned. This narrower path was lined with wild grasses, and and small woodland flowers rather than the carefully cultivated blooms of the main gardens. It had a slightly untamed quality that she found immediately appealing. Nature allowed to express itself more freely, though still with the subtle guidance of experienced gardeners. After following this path for several minutes, the princess came upon a high stone wall covered in climbing vines with small purple flowers. Set into this wall was a wooden door, weathered by years of sun and rain into a soft silvery colour. Just as Master Thorn had said, it was unlocked, opening easily when she turned the simple iron handle. Stepping through the doorway, the princess found herself in an enclosed garden unlike any other in the palace grounds. While the main gardens were expansive and designed to impress with grand vistas and symmetrical arrangements, this space felt intimate, almost secret. Circular in shape and surrounded by the vine-covered stone wall, it featured winding, narrow paths between beds of plants that indeed seemed to follow no particular order or design. Flowers of various shapes and colours grew alongside herbs and flowering shrubs, creating a tapestry of green interspersed with bright blooms. At the centre of this circular garden stood a small stone fountain, much simpler than the grand ones found elsewhere in the palace grounds. Water bubbled up gently from a central spring, flowing over smooth river stones before collecting in a basin below. The sound it created was soothing, a quiet, continuous burbling that seemed to form the perfect backdrop for contemplation. The princess moved slowly along the narrow paths, observing the unnamed plants with growing interest. Without formal designations, she found herself noticing their qualities more directly. The particular shade of purple in a bell-shaped flower, the unusual pattern of leaves on a low-growing shrub, the complex structure of a blossom that seemed to spiral inward endlessly. Each plant existed fully as itself, without the layer of identification that naming provides. She knelt beside a cluster of flowers she had never seen before, delicate blooms with petals that shifted from pale blue at their edges to nearly white at their centres. Their stems were slender but strong, allowing them to dance slightly with each passing breeze. The princess reached out to touch one gently with her fingertip, feeling the silky texture of its petals. "You are beautiful," she whispered to the flower, with or without a name. As the words left her lips, she felt a deep resonance within herself. Was this not also true for her? In this day of being nameless, she had experienced the world with heightened awareness, had engaged in meaningful conversation, had appreciated beauty, and contemplated important questions. She had been fully herself, observing, feeling, thinking, existing, without the label that had previously seemed so essential to her identity. The princess settled on a small stone bench near the central fountain, listening to the gentle sound of water flowing over stones. The afternoon light filtered through the leaves of a tall, unnamed tree that provided dappled shade for this section of the garden. She watched the patterns of light and shadow shift on the ground as the breeze moved through the branches above. In this peaceful setting, surrounded by growing things that thrived without designation, the princess began to consider whether finding her lost name was truly necessary. Perhaps its absence was not a problem to be solved, but an opportunity to experience herself and her world differently. Each unnamed plant in this garden had its own intrinsic nature, its particular way of growing, blooming, relating to sun and soil and water. These essential qualities existed independent of any label humans might assign. As this understanding deepened within her, the princess princess felt a curious lightness, as though letting go of the need to be named had released a subtle tension she hadn't known she was carrying. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply of the garden's complex fragrance, soil and flower and herb blending into something both wild and comforting. When she opened her eyes again, she noticed the quality of light had changed. The sun was lower now, casting longer shadows across the garden. She had spent more time in contemplation than she had realized. Soon, she would need to return to the palace for the evening meal with her father, continuing to navigate this nameless day. But before leaving this special place, she wanted to spend a few more moments in its peaceful embrace. The princess leaned back slightly on her stone bench, relaxing her shoulders and allowing her hands to rest gently in her lap. Her breathing found a natural, unhurried rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the bubbling of the fountain. In this state of quiet presence, she became aware of something new. Not another loss, but a gentle emergence. While her formal name remained absent, she felt a different kind of identification forming within her, one based not on what others called her, but on her own direct experience of herself. This self-knowing felt more substantial somehow, more authentic than the familiar name she had temporarily lost. With this sense of discovery warming her heart, the princess finally rose from the bench. She took one last look around the forgotten garden, silently thanking it for the wisdom it had shared through its unnamed inhabitants. Then she made her way back to the wooden door, stepping through it with a sense that she was carrying something precious from this place. Not a recovered name, but a deeper understanding of identity itself. As she walked back along the winding paths toward the palace, the princess noticed the garden staff lighting lanterns along the main walkways. The soft glow they created guided her way as twilight began to settle over the kingdom of Albaska. Above, the first stars were becoming visible in the deepening blue of the evening sky, each one shining with its own particular light, known or unknown, named or unnamed. As twilight deepened into early evening, the princess made her way back to the palace, following paths now illuminated by lanterns that cast pools of gentle golden light every few paces. The air had cooled slightly with the setting of the sun, carrying the scents of evening flowers that opened their blossoms only as day surrendered to night. Crickets had begun their rhythmic chorus in the garden grasses, creating a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. She entered the palace through a side door that led into a corridor near the family dining room, a smaller, more intimate space than the grand hall used for formal occasions. The walls here were lined with tapestries depicting pastoral scenes from the kingdom's countryside, their colours softened by years of gentle light, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. As she approached the dining room, the princess could hear the soft clink of silverware being arranged, the quiet murmur of servants preparing the evening meal. The familiar sounds carried a comforting quality, reminding her that while her experience today had been unusual, the rhythms of palace life continued unchanged around her. Her father was already seated at the table when she entered, reading through some correspondence by the light of the candelabra that cast a warm glow over the polished wood. He looked up as she approached, his face brightening with affection. "Ah, there you are," he said warmly, setting aside his papers. "I was beginning to think you had become so enchanted with the gardens that you might stay out until moonrise." The princess smiled as she took her seat opposite him. "I nearly did. I discovered the forgotten garden today, the one with unnamed plants that grandmother restored." King Albaska's eyes lit with recognition. "Ah, yes, a special place indeed. I haven't visited it some time, though I always find it peaceful when I do." He studied her face for a moment. "Did you enjoy it?" "Very much," she replied, as a servant discreetly filled her goblet with water infused with mint and cucumber. "There's something liberating about a place where things simply exist as they are, without formal designation." Her father nodded thoughtfully. "Your grandmother felt the same way. She used to say that sometimes our human need to categorize and label everything can come between us and direct experience." He smiled at memory. She would occasionally refer to plants by names she invented in the moment, names that described what she felt in their presence rather than their botanical classifications. The princess felt a surge of connection to the grandmother she had never known, who had died before her birth. What kinds of names would she give them? "Oh, beautiful, whimsical ones," the king said, his voice warming with reminiscence. "Dawn's first sigh for a pale pink flower that opened at sunrise. Whisper bearer for a tall grass whose seed head seemed to carry messages in the wind." Names that spoke of relationship and experience rather than objective identification. As servants brought in the first course, a chilled soup of summer, vegetables garnished with tiny edible flowers, the princess considered how perfectly this aligned with her own experience today. "Father," she said after tasting the delicate soup, "do you believe our names contain our essence? Or are they simply convenient labels applied to something much deeper and more complex?" King Albaska regarded her with interest, seeming to recognize that her question carried more significance than casual dinner conversation. "What brings this philosophical inquiry to mind?" The princess hesitated, uncertain how to explain her unusual situation without causing concern. Yet as she looked at her father's kind, wise face, she felt sure he would understand. "Something curious happened to me today," she said quietly. "When I woke this morning, I discovered I could not remember my name. Everything else about myself and my life remains clear, but my name seems to have slipped away." She watched carefully for his reaction, prepared for alarm or concern. Instead, an expression of gentle understanding passed across his features, followed by something that looked almost like recognition. "I see," he said softly. After a thoughtful pause, he continued, "And how has this experience been for you? Has it caused you distress?" "Surprisingly, no," she answered truthfully. "At first, I felt only curiosity. As the day progressed, I began to find it somewhat enlightening. Without the familiar identification of my name, I've experienced everything more directly, more immediately." She gestured slightly with her hand, searching for the right words. "It's as though I'm seeing the world and myself from a different perspective, one step removed from habitual patterns." The king nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. "And no one has addressed you by name today? No one has reminded you?" "No," she replied. "Everyone has used my title or terms of respect, but never my name. It seems an extraordinary coincidence." At this, her father smiled slightly. "Perhaps not entirely a coincidence," he said. He set down his spoon and folded his hands on the table, his expression becoming more serious. "What you're experiencing is not unknown in our family's history. In fact, it happened to me when I was approximately your age." The princess felt a flutter of surprise. "Truly? You lost your name as well?" "Yes, though perhaps lost isn't quite the right word. It's more like..." He paused, searching for the appropriate description. "More like the name steps back for a time, creating conversation momentarily, thanking the staff before continuing in slightly lowered voices. In our family, the king explained, this experience has occurred for generations, usually as one transitions from youth to mature adulthood. Not everyone experiences it in the same way. For some, it's a momentary disorientation, quickly resolved. For others, like myself and apparently you, it becomes a more significant journey of discovery. But why does it happen? She asked, genuinely curious. And why have I never heard of this before? As to why, her father said, taking a small bite of his meal, I believe it happens when we are ready to know ourselves beyond the identities given to us by others. Even loving others like parents is a gentle invitation to find our own internal compass, to recognize ourselves from within, rather than through external reflection. He took a sip of water before continuing. And you haven't heard of it, because it's not something that can be anticipated or prepared for. To know of it in advance would potentially influence the experience, turning a natural unfolding into something approached with expectation or even strategy. The princess considered this as she tasted her own meal, appreciating the delicate flavours that the palace chef had created. How long did your experience last? She finally asked. 3 days, the king replied, though I know of ancestors who experienced it for as little as a few hours or as long as a week. It resolves itself when it has served its purpose, when the deeper knowing has had sufficient time to take root. And how will I know when that happens? Will my name simply return to my mind? Her father smiled gently. You'll know. There's a moment of quiet recognition, of integration between what you've always been called and who you've come to know yourself to be. The name returns, but its relationship to your sense of self is transformed. Did it change how you saw yourself afterward, I mean? The princess leaned forward slightly, genuinely interested in her father's experience. Profoundly, he answered with a nod. Before, I think I saw myself primarily through the expectations attached to my name and title. The future king, my father's son, the bearer of family traditions. Afterward, I recognized that while those aspects were part of me, they weren't the whole. I became more confident in my own perceptions, more trusting of my inner guidance. He smiled. It made me a better king, I believe, and hopefully a better father as well. The princess felt a wave of affection for this wise man who had raised her with such compassionate understanding. You've been a wonderful father, she assured him. They continued their meal in comfortable conversation, discussing lighter matters, the progress of the summer flowers, news from neighbouring kingdoms, books they had recently enjoyed. Throughout the exchange, the princess noticed how her father skillfully avoided using her name, supporting her experience without drawing attention to the technique. As their meal concluded with a light dessert of summer berries and sweet cream, the king mentioned the walk he had proposed that morning. The evening is quite lovely, he said. Would you still care to join me for a stroll before retiring? I'd love to, she replied, tapping her lips with a napkin before rising from the table. Together they left the dining room and made their way through the palace to a terrace that overlooked the western gardens. The sky had deepened to indigo, and stars were clearly visible now, their light crisp and bright in the clear summer air. A nearly full moon cast silver illumination over the landscape, transforming the familiar gardens into a dreamlike realm of light and shadow. They descended the terrace steps in comfortable silence, following a wide path that wound beneath ancient trees whose branches formed a partial scents of night-blooming flowers and the subtle mineral aroma of stone pathways still releasing the day's warmth. When I was experiencing my own nameless time, the king said as they walked, I found evenings particularly powerful. There's something about the boundary between day and night that seems to echo the threshold state between identified and unidentified self. The princess nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Everything seems both more defined and more mysterious in this light, she observed, looking at how moonlight simultaneously illuminated the edges of objects while obscuring their details, like seeing the essential shape of things without all the specifics that daylight reveals. Well expressed, her father said approvingly. That's very much what this experience offers. A chance to perceive the essential self without all the specific details that can sometimes distract from deeper truth. They continued walking, their pace unhurried, allowing silence to flow naturally between periods of conversation. The sounds of night creatures, the occasional flutter of an owl's wings, the persistent chorus of crickets, the distant calls of frogs from the garden ponds, created a gentle soundtrack for their journey. Eventually they came to a small clearing where stone benches had been arranged in a semicircle around a reflecting pool. In daylight, this pool mirrored the surrounding trees and sky. By night, it held the moon's reflection, perfectly round and luminous against the dark water. They sat side by side on one of the benches, gazing at the moon floating on the still surface of the pool. The coolness of the stone bench seeped through their clothing, providing a grounding physical sensation to balance the ethereal quality of the moonlit scene before them. Tomorrow, the king said after a comfortable silence, I'd suggest you might visit the Royal Observatory in the East Tower. The chief astronomer, Master Celeste, has recently completed some fascinating work on celestial patterns. Given your current state of mind, you might find his perspective interesting. I haven't visited the observatory in some time, the princess replied. It sounds like a perfect activity for tomorrow. Master Celeste is usually there from mid-morning onward, her father added. He's always pleased to have an interested visitor, especially one who asks thoughtful questions. He smiled at her. Something tells me you'll have plenty of those. They sat a while longer in the peaceful clearing, occasionally sharing observations about the night sky or memories of other evenings they had spent similarly. The princess felt a deep appreciation for her father's gentle guidance, offering suggestions without directive, sharing his experience without imposing expectations on hers. When the night air grew cooler and a yawn escaped her, despite attempts to suppress it, the king suggested they return to the palace. They rose from the bench and made their way back along the moonlit paths, their steps slower now with the evening's growing lateness. At the entrance to the royal residence, they paused before separating to their respective chambers. The king placed his hands gently on his daughter's shoulders, looking at her with warm affection. Trust this process, he said softly. It's a gift, though sometimes a challenging one. Allow yourself to experience it fully, without rushing towards resolution. I will, she promised. Thank you for sharing your wisdom about it. Sleep well, my dear one, he said, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. Dream deeply. Good night, father, she replied, feeling both the comfort of his familiar presence and a new appreciation for the depth of understanding between them. As she made her way through quiet corridors towards her chamber, the princess felt a sense of peaceful anticipation about the continuing journey ahead. What had begun as a curious absence had been transformed through her father's guidance into a recognised rite of passage, an opportunity for deeper self-knowledge. Reaching her room, she found that her lady's maid had already turned down the bed and left a small vase of fresh night-blooming flowers on the bedside table. Their sweet fragrance filled the room, creating an atmosphere of gentle tranquility. A single candle burned in a silver holder, providing just enough light for her evening preparations. The princess moved through her nighttime routine with mindful awareness, washing her face in cool water, brushing her hair until it shone in the candlelight, changing from her day dress into a soft nightgown of pale silk. Each action was performed with deliberate presence, appreciating the sensations and the quiet rhythm of preparing for rest. When she finally extinguished the candle and slipped beneath the cool sheets of her bed, the princess lay awake for a little while, watching moonlight create patterns on her ceiling through the partially open curtains. She reflected on the events of this most unusual day, the discovery of her name's absence, the conversations in the garden and library, the revelation of her family's history with this experience, and most significantly, the insights that had begun to emerge through it all. As sleep began to draw her into its gentle embrace, the princess felt none of the concern or disorientation that might have accompanied her situation. Instead, she experienced a curious combination of peaceful acceptance and quiet anticipation, ready to continue this journey of self-discovery as it unfolded in its own perfect timing. Her last conscious thought before drifting into dreams was not of her missing name, but of the unnamed flowers in the forgotten garden, beautiful, complete, and perfectly themselves, without any designation to define them. With this image warming her heart, she slipped into deep, restful sleep, allowing the quiet darkness to embrace her completely. Morning arrived with gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through the princess's curtains in shifting patterns of gold and amber. She awakened gradually, awareness returning in layers. First, the sensation of warm bed covers, then the sounds of early birds outside her window. Finally, the remembrance of her continuing nameless state and the discoveries that had accompanied it. She lay still for a few moments, eyes closed, taking inventory of her experience. The absence of her name remained, yet it felt different this morning, less like something missing and more like space that had been deliberately cleared, like a room emptied to make way for new furnishings. This space felt precious now, an opportunity rather than a lack. When she finally opened her eyes, the princess noticed how the morning light transformed her familiar chamber, highlighting details she might otherwise have overlooked. The intricate pattern of the tapestry hanging on her wall, the subtle variations of colour in the wooden beams of her ceiling, the complex shadows cast by the vase of flowers on her bedside table. This heightened awareness seemed connected to her nameless state, as though the energy usually directed toward maintaining her identified self was now available for direct perception. She rose from bed with deliberate movements, appreciating the cool touch of the wooden floor beneath her feet, the slight stretch in her muscles as she reached her arms overhead, the fresh morning air flowing through her partially opened window. Each sensation registered with unusual clarity, creating a symphony of physical experience that grounded her firmly in the present moment. After washing and dressing in a gown of soft lavender, the princess breakfasted alone in her chamber, her lady's maid having brought a tray with fresh bread, honey, and summer fruits. As she ate, She recalled her father's suggestion from the previous evening to visit the Royal Observatory and speak with Master Celeste, the chief astronomer. The East Tower that housed the observatory was one of the tallest structures in the palace complex, offering unobstructed views of the sky above and the kingdom below. The princess had visited it occasionally throughout her life, usually during special celestial events that the astronomers would point out through their telescopes. She hadn't been there in recent months, however, and felt a flutter of anticipation at the prospect of seeing what new discoveries Master Celeste might have made. After finishing her breakfast, she made her way through the palace corridors and up the winding staircase that led to the East Tower. The climb was substantial, over 100 stone steps leading ever upward in a spiral. But the princess took her time, pausing occasionally to look through the narrow windows that punctuated the stairwell, offering glimpses of the kingdom from increasing heights. Near the top of the tower, slightly breathless from the climb, she came to a heavy wooden door with brass fittings burnished from years of use. She knocked gently, hearing the sound echo in the stone stairwell around her. After a moment, the door swung open to reveal Master Celeste, the chief astronomer, a tall, slender man with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that seemed to carry something of the night sky within them, deep and filled with distant lights. He wore the simple blue robes typical of the kingdom's scientists and scholars, though his were adorned with small silver stars embroidered around the collar and cups. "Your Highness," he said with obvious pleasure, bowing slightly. "What a delightful surprise. Please, do come in." The princess stepped into the circular chamber that formed the main room of the observatory. It was a fascinating space, with a high domed ceiling painted to represent the night sky, complete with all the major constellations visible from the kingdom. The walls were lined with bookshelves containing astronomical texts, charts, and journals recording centuries of observations. Various instruments were positioned around the room, telescopes of different sizes, astrolabes, celestial globes, and devices she couldn't name. Large windows faced in each cardinal direction, allowing observation of the entire sky without moving the heaviest instruments. The morning sunlight streamed through the eastern window, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air like tiny stars. "Your father mentioned you might visit today," Master Celeste said, moving to clear some charts from a comfortable chair near the centre of the room. "He said you were in a particularly contemplative state of mind that might appreciate some astronomical perspective." The princess smiled, appreciating her father's subtle preparation for her visit without revealing her specific circumstance. "Yes, I've been considering questions of identity and perception. Father thought your recent work might offer insights relevant to my contemplations." "Ah," the astronomer nodded, his eyes brightening with understanding. "He referred to my studies of celestial patterns and perspectives. Please sit, Your Highness. Would you care for some tea? I keep a small supply here to sustain me during long nights of observation." "That would be lovely, thank you," she replied, taking the offered seat. Master Celeste moved to a small side table where a ceramic pot rested on a warming stone. He poured steaming tea into 2 cups, handing one to the princess before taking his own seat in a chair, positioned so they faced each other with a celestial globe between them. "Your father likely mentioned my recent work on what I've been calling positional understanding," the astronomer began, gesturing toward the ceiling where the painted stars glimmered in the morning light. "It's the study of how our perception of the cosmos changes dramatically depending on our position within it, and yet the essential nature of of what we're observing remains unchanged. The princess sipped her tea, a fragrant blend with hints of jasmine and citrus, and considered his words. Could you explain further? It sounds fascinating. Of course. Master Celeste leaned forward slightly, his eyes alight with enthusiasm for his subject. Consider the constellations above us. He pointed to the painted ceiling. From our position here in Albaska, we see particular patterns among the stars: the Great Bear, the Dragon, the Crown, and so forth. These patterns have meaning to us, guiding navigation, marking seasons, inspiring stories. He rose and moved to a large book open on a nearby table, turning it toward her. The page showed different star maps side by side, but observers in distant lands see entirely different patterns in the same stars, the very same points of light that we organise into the figure of a bear might, to observers in the southern islands, form part of a great sea creature, or to those in the eastern mountains, represent a legendary warrior. The princess studied the different star maps with interest. So, the stars themselves don't change? Precisely, Master Celeste said with obvious approval. The celestial bodies remain exactly what they are. Only our perception and organisation of them shifts with our position and cultural understanding. He returned to his seat, cradling his teacup. What fascinates me is that neither perspective is wrong. Each is true and valid from its own position of observation, yet none captures the complete reality of the cosmos. That's rather humbling, the princess observed, to think that our understanding, even when carefully observed and recorded, is always partial, always positioned. Indeed, the astronomer nodded, but I find it liberating rather than discouraging. It reminds us that there's always more to discover, always new perspectives to consider. He gestured toward the celestial globe between them. May I demonstrate something else? When she nodded, Master Celeste reached out and gently rotated the globe, which represented the Earth at the centre, with the heavenly bodies arranged around it according to traditional understanding. For centuries, we believed the sun, moon, and stars all rotated around our world, which remained fixed at the centre of creation. This understanding shaped everything from our calendars to our philosophies. He then moved to a smaller table and uncovered another model, this one showing the sun at the centre with planets, including a small blue-green sphere representing their world, rotating around it. But when we shifted perspective and considered the possibility that we move while the sun remains relatively fixed, suddenly our calculations became simpler, our predictions more accurate. The princess rose to examine this second model more closely, and yet nothing in the heavens actually changed when this new understanding emerged. Only our perception shifted. Exactly. Master Celeste's voice carried the quiet excitement of someone who has found a rare person who truly understands their work. The cosmos continued exactly as it always had. Our relationship to it transformed through a shift in perspective. He regarded her thoughtfully. If I may ask, Your Highness, how does this relate to your current contemplations? The princess considered how much to share of her unusual experience. Something about the astronomer's open-minded approach to different perspectives made her feel comfortable being forthright. I've been experiencing a peculiar phenomenon, she said carefully. Since yesterday morning, I've been unable to recall my own name. If Master Celeste was surprised by this revelation, he didn't show it. Instead, he nodded with quiet interest, waiting for her to continue. It's not troubling. strangely enough," she went on. "In fact, it's been rather illuminating. Without the familiar designation I've carried all my life, I've been experiencing myself and the world differently, more directly, with fewer preconceptions." She gestured towards his celestial models. "Your work seems to parallel this experience, suggesting that what we perceive depends greatly on the position from which we observe, including how we observe ourselves." The astronomer's eyes showed deep understanding. "What a fascinating parallel indeed." He set his teacup down and moved to a bookshelf, retrieving an ancient volume bound in faded blue leather. "There's an old astronomical concept that might interest you, called the still point." He opened the book carefully, revealing pages of delicate writing accompanied by intricate diagrams. Early astronomers observed that while the stars appear to move across the night sky, there is one point, what we now call the celestial pole, that remains fixed. If you watch throughout the night, all stars appear to rotate around this still point. Master Celeste turned the book so she could see the illustration, a circle of stars with a single point at its center. They believed this still point represented something profound, a fixed reference in the midst of constant motion, an anchoring truth around which all other celestial movements organized themselves. The princess studied the diagram, feeling a resonance with her own experience. "And in your understanding of positional astronomy, does this still point actually exist, or is it also a matter of perspective?" "Ah, an excellent question," he replied with appreciation. "The stillness of that point is relative to our position as observers. From our vantage point on Earth, it appears fixed. Yet from another position in the cosmos, that same point would appear to move, and some other reference would serve as the still center." He closed the book gently. "But the concept remains valuable, I think. We all need reference points that feel stable, even while recognizing their positioned nature." The princess contemplated this idea, seeing its application to her nameless state. "So, perhaps what I'm experiencing is a temporary suspension of one reference point, my name, which allows me to recognize other, more essential aspects of myself that remain constant regardless of designation." "That's a profound insight, Your Highness," Master Celeste said with genuine respect. "In my studies of the cosmos, I've come to believe that sometimes we must deliberately shift our perspective, even temporarily setting aside established understandings, to discover deeper truths that have always been present but were obscured by habitual perception." They continued their conversation for some time, the astronomer sharing other celestial phenomena that offered metaphorical insights into the princess's experience. He showed her how certain stars appear to change colour when observed through different atmospheric conditions, though their essential nature remains unchanged. He described how the moon presents different faces throughout its cycle, while remaining fundamentally the same celestial body. Through these astronomical parallels, the princess gained new ways of understanding her nameless state, not as an absence or loss, but as a shift in observational perspective that revealed aspects of herself previously obscured by familiar identification. As their conversation drew to a natural close, Master Celeste offered one final observation. The stars teach us that identity is both fixed and flowing, constant in essence yet ever changing in appearance, depending on when and how we observe. Perhaps your experience is offering a similar lesson about the nature of self. The princess thanked him warmly for his insights and hospitality. As she prepared to depart, the astronomer moved to a small drawer and withdrew a delicate silver object hanging from a fine chain. "If I might be so bold," he said, extending it towards her, "I'd like to offer you this. It's a celestial compass, a device that helps one find direction using the stars rather than magnetic forces. It seems particularly appropriate given your current journey." The princess accepted the gift with genuine appreciation, examining the intricate instrument with its crystal center and precisely etched markings. "It's beautiful. Thank you, Master Celeste. May it remind you that even when familiar references shift or disappear, deeper patterns remain to guide us," he said with a respectful bow, descending the tower staircase with the silver compass nestled in her palm. The princess felt her understanding of her nameless state expanding and deepening. What had begun as a curious absence had transformed through conversations with the gardener, her father, and now the astronomer, into a recognized opportunity for profound insight. Each step down the spiral staircase seemed to integrate these perspectives more fully into her understanding. Like stars viewed from different positions, her sense of self remained essentially stable, while the perspective from which she observed it shifted with the temporary absence of her name. By the time she reached the bottom of the tower, the princess felt a growing sense of peaceful anticipation. Her journey was not yet complete, but its purpose was becoming clearer with each conversation, each moment of reflection. The afternoon stretched before her with possibilities for further discovery, and she moved forward into it with the lightness of someone who has begun to understand the gift hidden within what might have initially seemed a loss. The afternoon sun cast long golden rays through the palace windows as the princess made her way from the observatory tower through the grand hall. The space was largely empty at this hour, allowing sunlight to illuminate the polished marble floors uninterrupted, creating pools of warmth where dust motes danced like tiny constellations. Her footsteps echoed slightly in the vast chamber, a gentle rhythm accompanying her thoughts. The celestial compass Master Celeste had given her rested in her palm, its silver surface occasionally catching the light as she moved. Its weight was slight but noticeable, a physical reminder of the insights she had gained from their conversation. Like the compass that found direction through celestial constants rather than magnetic forces, she was learning to orient herself through deeper aspects of identity rather than the familiar reference of her name. As she passed through the hall, the princess noticed a servant arranging fresh flowers in a tall vase near one of the arched doorways. The woman looked up as the princess approached, curtsying respectfully. "Those are beautiful," the princess commented, pausing to admire the arrangement of lilies and blue delphinium. "They capture the essence of summer perfectly. Thank you, Your Highness," the woman replied with a pleased smile. "The gardeners brought them in from the eastern beds just this morning." She hesitated slightly before adding, "If I may say so, you look especially well today. There's a brightness about you." The princess thanked her for the kind observation, realizing that perhaps her internal experience was becoming visible externally. The clarity and presence she felt manifesting as a perceptible quality. The thought warmed her as she continued through the palace, considering where to go next. The silver compass in her hand seemed to suggest direction, though not in any literal way. Following an intuitive pull, the princess found herself drawn toward the palace music room, a space she hadn't visited in several days. Located in the western wing, this chamber was designed for optimal acoustics high ceiling, wooden floors, and walls lined with tapestries that absorbed sound in just the right measure to create perfect resonance. Upon entering, she found the room empty of people, but filled with instruments. A grand piano near the large window, several stringed instruments resting in stands along one wall, a small harp positioned near a comfortable chair where afternoon light would illuminate the player's hands. Sheet music was arranged neatly on various stands, suggesting recent use, though no musicians were currently present. The princess moved to the piano, running her fingers lightly over the polished surface before setting the celestial compass on top of it. She seated herself on the bench, adjusting her lavender gown around her, and lifted the cover to reveal the keys, alternating black and white in their familiar pattern, waiting silently for touch to transform them into sound. Music had been part of her education since childhood. While she would not consider herself a virtuoso, she played with genuine feeling and competence, finding in music another language through which to express and explore her inner world. Today, with her name still absent and her awareness heightened, she wondered how this familiar activity might feel different. She placed her hands gently on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. Without deciding in advance what to play, she allowed her hands to begin moving, creating a simple melody that emerged spontaneously. The notes resonated in the perfect acoustics of the room, each one distinct, yet flowing into the next, like water over stones in a stream. As she continued playing, the princess noticed something unusual about the experience. Normally, when she played music, a part of her mind would remain separate, observing, judging, comparing her performance to previous attempts or to some ideal standard. Today, that observer seemed to have quieted. Instead, she experienced the music directly, the physical sensation of keys yielding to pressure, the vibration of sound in the air, the emotional qualities that each phrase evoked, without the layer of self-consciousness that a named identity usually carried. The princess found herself merging more completely with the music. Her fingers moved with increased fluidity, finding harmonies and transitions that felt both surprising and inevitable. The melody evolved naturally, expressing something wordless yet precise about her current state of being. The spaciousness, the clarity, the sense of discovery. She played for some time, losing track of minutes as the music flowed through her. Eventually, the melody found its natural conclusion, and the final notes hung in the air before gradually fading into silence. The princess sat quietly at the piano, hands resting lightly on the keys, experiencing the transition from sound back to stillness. "That was quite beautiful," came a gentle voice from the doorway. "I don't believe I've heard that piece before." The princess turned to see Lady Lyra, the palace music teacher, standing at the entrance to the room, a woman of middle years with kind eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair. Lady Lyra had taught music to the royal family and court for nearly 2 decades. "Thank you," the princess replied, feeling no embarrassment at having been overheard. "It wasn't any particular piece. I was simply allowing the music to emerge." Lady Lyra's eyebrows rose slightly in appreciation as she moved further into the room. "Improvisation is a special skill. You were playing from somewhere deep within, I think." She gestured toward the piano bench. "May I join you?" The princess moved to make space, and Lady Lyra settled beside her, her simple blue dress rustling softly as she arranged herself. "Music has a curious relationship with identity," she commented, lightly touching a key without pressing it enough to make a sound. distinctive voice, what we might call their musical identity. On the other hand, the deepest music often comes from a place beyond personal identity, where the musician becomes a vessel for something larger. The princess considered this insight, feeling its relevance to her current experience. "I noticed that today," she admitted. "Usually when I play, I'm aware of myself playing, monitoring, judging, adjusting. But just now, that self-consciousness was quieter. It felt more like the music was playing through me rather than being played by me." "Exactly," Lady Lyra nodded with obvious understanding. "Musicians spend years developing technical skill, only to eventually learn that the most profound music comes when they get out of their own way." She smiled. "What you just experienced is what many musicians actively seek, that state of creative flow where the boundary between player and played becomes permeable." The princess glanced at the celestial compass, still resting on top of the piano, thinking of Master Celeste's insights about perspective and perception. "It seems similar to what happens when observing the stars," she said. "We can see them more clearly when we slightly shift our focus away from looking directly at them." "An apt comparison," Lady Lyra agreed. "The most essential things often reveal themselves through indirect perception." She turned slightly on the bench to face the princess more directly. "If you don't mind my asking, what prompted this particular musical exploration today? There was something distinctly different about your playing, a quality of presence I haven't heard before." Again, the princess felt comfortable sharing her unusual circumstance. "I've been experiencing something rather extraordinary since yesterday morning," she explained. "I seem to have temporarily lost access to my name. Everything else about myself and my life remains clear, but the specific designation that has identified me is currently unavailable." Lady Lyra received this information with calm interest rather than alarm. "How fascinating," she said after a moment's reflection. "And this has affected your music making in the way you described?" "Yes, along with other experiences," the princess confirmed. "Without the familiar reference point of my name, I seem to be perceiving everything more directly, including music, apparently." The music teacher nodded thoughtfully. "There's wisdom in this experience, I think. In music, we sometimes become too attached to our identity as a particular kind of musician, a pianist rather than a singer, a classical performer rather than an improviser. These labels can become limitations." She gestured toward the piano keys. "The instrument doesn't know what kind of musician you believe yourself to be. It responds simply to your touch in this moment, without history or expectation." "That's a beautiful way to think about it," the princess said, appreciating the insight. Lady Lyra rose from the bench and moved to retrieve a small wooden flute from a nearby shelf. "There's an ancient musical practice I think you might find relevant to your current state," she said, returning to sit in a chair facing the piano. "It's called transparent playing, a technique where musicians attempt to remove all personal signature from their performance, becoming so clear and present that the music itself shines through without individual coloration." She lifted the flute to her lips and began to play a simple, haunting melody. The sound was pure and clear, filling the room with its pristine quality. There was something remarkably direct about the music. No excessive ornamentation or technical display, just the essential expression of the melody itself. When she finished, Lady Lyra lowered the flute to her lap. In transparent playing, the musician seeks to become like clear glass through which light passes unchanged. It requires setting aside not only ego, but also personal style and habitual patterns. She offered the flute to the princess. "Would you like to try?" The princess accepted the instrument, feeling its smooth, wooden surface, the precise placement of finger holes along its length. "How does one begin?" "Start by focusing on your breath," Lady Lyra instructed gently. "Before you even attempt to create sound, simply feel the air moving through you. When you're ready to play, hold the intention of allowing the music to emerge without imposing your will or identity upon it. Don't try to play beautifully or correctly. Just allow yourself to be the vessel through which the music flows." The princess closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on her breathing as suggested. She felt the air entering her body, filling her lungs, and then releasing, a continuous flow that required no conscious effort. When she felt ready, she raised the flute to her lips and began to play. The first notes were tentative, but as she continued, allowing herself to follow Lady Lyra's guidance about becoming transparent to the music, something shifted. The sound became clearer, more direct. She wasn't playing a composition she knew, or even creating one intentionally. She was simply allowing sound to emerge in its own natural pattern, without imposition or control. When the melody found its natural conclusion, the princess lowered the flute, feeling a deep sense of peace radiating through her body. The experience had been unlike any previous musical encounter, a direct communion with sound itself, rather than a performance or creation. "Beautiful," Lady Lyra said softly. "You found the transparency quite naturally. I think your current state of being, without a name, has already brought you to the threshold of this understanding." They spent the next hour exploring this concept further. Lady Lyra guiding the princess through various exercises in transparent playing, using both the flute and returning to the piano. With each attempt, the princess found it easier to access this state of direct musical expression, untethered from self-consciousness or performative identity. Music offers us a unique opportunity, Lady Lyra observed as their session drew to a close. It allows us to experience communication without words, expression without explanation, connection without identification. Perhaps that's why it can touch us so deeply. It speaks directly to our essential nature, beyond the names and roles we typically use to know ourselves. As the princess prepared to leave the music room, Lady Lyra offered a final thought. Consider that your name, when it returns, might function like a musical instrument, not as your essential self, but as a tool through which your deeper nature expresses itself in the world. With this insight resonating within her, the princess retrieved the celestial compass from the piano and thanked Lady Lyra for the unexpected but precious guidance. She left the music room feeling another layer of understanding integrating into her experience. Her nameless state now illuminated not only by astronomical perspective, but also by musical wisdom. The palace corridors were bathed in late afternoon light as she made her way toward the gardens, feeling drawn once more to the open air and natural beauty. The day was moving toward evening, the quality of sunlight shifting to warmer gold, creating long shadows that stretched across the grounds. She found a quiet bench beneath a flowering tree, its pale pink blossoms occasionally drifting down around her like gentle snow. From this vantage point, she could see much of the palace gardens, the formal beds with their geometric precision, the wilder areas where plants were allowed to grow more naturally, and in the distance, the stone wall that enclosed the forgotten garden she had discovered the previous day. reflected on the conversations and experiences she had engaged in since discovering her nameless state. Master Thorn's wisdom about plants thriving without designation, her father's revelation about their family's history with this experience, Master Celeste's insights about perspective and perception, and now Lady Lyra's guidance on transparent being through music. Each had contributed to a growing understanding of what this journey might offer her. She held the celestial compass in her open palm, watching how it caught the late afternoon light. Without consciously intending to, she began to hum softly, a simple melody that seemed to express the peace and clarity she was feeling. Sound blended with the garden's natural music, birdsong, the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze, the distant murmur of a fountain. As twilight began to soften the edges of the world around her, the princess felt no urgency to return inside or to resolve her unusual situation. She was content to exist in this transitional state, neither seeking nor avoiding resolution, simply being present to each moment as it unfolded. The spaciousness created by her name's absence had become precious to her now, a rare opportunity to experience herself and her world from a perspective unbounded by familiar identification. With this peaceful acceptance warming her heart, she remained in the garden as the first stars became visible in the deepening blue of the evening sky, each one a distant light finding its perfect place in the vast pattern of the cosmos. Like these stars, she too was finding her place, not through external designation, but through the recognition of her essential nature, shining with its own quiet light, regardless of what name might or might not identify it. The princess awakened on the third morning of her nameless journey to the sound of gentle rain against her bedroom windows. Unlike the heavy downpour from nights earlier, this was a soft, rhythmic pattering, nature's own lullaby that had likely been playing for hours as she slept. The light in her chamber was diffused and pearly, filtered through rain clouds that transformed the usual bright morning into something more subtle and subdued. She lay quietly beneath her blankets, listening to the continuous gentle sound, feeling exceptionally peaceful. The past 2 days had brought numerous insights through conversations and experiences throughout the palace and gardens. Now, with the rain creating a natural sanctuary of her bedroom, she felt drawn to spend time in deeper reflection, allowing all she had learned to integrate more fully. Rising unhurriedly, she moved to the window, drawing back the curtains to gaze out at the misty landscape. The gardens below were transformed by the gentle precipitation. Colours deepened, outlines softened, the entire scene taking on a dreamlike quality. Drops of water clung to leaves and flower petals, occasionally gathering enough weight to fall in slow, heavy tears to the ground below. Rather than following her usual morning routine, the princess decided to remain in her nightgown, adding only a soft woolen shawl around her shoulders for warmth. She asked her lady's maid, who arrived with a breakfast tray, to inform the king that she would be spending the morning in quiet contemplation and would join him later in the day. The maid departed with the message, leaving the princess to enjoy her simple breakfast of warm bread, honey and mint tea, while seated at the window, watching the gentle rain continue its patient work of renewal. After eating, she moved to a comfortable chair near the hearth, where a small fire had been lit to ward off the dampness of the rainy day. From a table nearby, she retrieved her journal, a leather-bound book filled with her observations, reflections and questions. The Though she had not written in it since before her name's departure, it now seemed the perfect companion for this morning of integration. Opening to a fresh page, the princess dipped her pen in ink and began to write, not about outer events, but about inner discoveries. She described the sensation of existing without the familiar reference point of her name, the heightened awareness she had experienced in gardens and music room alike, the insights gained through conversations with those she had encountered. As her pen moved across the page, she noticed something interesting. Without a name to sign or refer to herself by, her writing took on a different quality. Rather than positioning observations as coming from a particular identified person, her words flowed from a more universal perspective, the seeing itself rather than a specific seer, the experiencing rather than an experiencer. This subtle shift seemed to open her writing to greater depth and clarity. She found herself exploring questions that might have seemed too abstract or philosophical before. What remains when familiar identity temporarily steps back? What is the relationship between name and nature, between designation and essence? How might one live from the still point at the centre of experience rather than from its circumference? The gentle sound of rain provided a soothing backdrop to these explorations, creating a sense of being held in a quiet space where deeper truths could emerge at their own pace. Occasionally, the princess would pause in her writing to simply gaze into the small fire, watching the dance of flames, allowing insights to settle more deeply into understanding before returning to the page. After some time at this contemplative practice, she felt drawn to another form of reflection. Setting aside her journal, the princess moved to the full-length mirror that stood in one corner of her chamber. In her simple nightgown, with the woolen shawl draped around her shoulders, hair still loosely flowing from sleep, she studied her reflection with the same quality of presence she had been bringing to her journal explorations. The face that gazed back at her was simultaneously familiar and new, features she had known all her life, yet now perceived with fresh awareness. Without the automatic association of these features with a particular name, she saw them more directly. The curve of cheek and brow, the colour and depth of eyes, the expressions that moved across this face like weather across a landscape. "Who are you?" she whispered to her reflection, not with anxiety, but with genuine curiosity. The question hung in the quiet air of her chamber, mingling with the sound of continuing rain. Her reflection offered no verbal answer, yet there was a response of sorts, a deepening sense of recognition that went beyond words or names. She was this living being, this consciousness experiencing itself through this particular form, this unique perspective in the vast tapestry of existence. A gentle smile formed on her lips, both the ones she felt moving and the ones she saw in the mirror. There was humour in this moment, a light-heartedness in recognising the beautiful absurdity of trying to capture in language or designation something as vast and fluid as being itself. Moving away from the mirror, the princess felt drawn to return to the window, where the rain continued its gentle percussion against glass and stone. She stood watching droplets trace meandering paths down the window pane, each following a unique route determined by invisible variations in the glass surface, by the precise weight and composition of the droplet itself, by the subtle currents of air, a perfect metaphor for how countless factors, most beyond awareness, shape the course of each life. As morning transitioned towards midday, the princess remained in this contemplative space, alternating between journal writing, quiet observation of rain occasional moments of simply resting in awareness itself. She felt no desire to rush this process or to fill the quiet with activity. The gentle rhythm of the rain created a perfect container for this inner exploration, each drop a reminder of how the present moment continuously renews itself. The hours passed with a dreamlike quality, measured not by clocks, but by subtle shifts in the light filtering through rain clouds, by the gradual burning down of logs in the hearth, by the changing temperature of her tea as it cooled beside her. This experience of time, fluid and qualitative rather than rigid and quantitative, seemed another gift of her nameless state, another layer of habitual perception that had softened to reveal something more essential beneath. When hunger eventually reminded her of bodily needs, the princess rang a small bell near her door, requesting a light midday meal. While waiting, she dressed simply in a comfortable gown of deep blue, the colour of evening skies, leaving her hair loose around her shoulders rather than arranging it in its usual more formal style. Everything about this rainy day invited simplicity, directness, a stepping away from unnecessary elaboration. A servant brought a tray with soup, bread and fresh fruit, setting it on a small table near the window before quietly departing. The princess ate mindfully, appreciating the complex flavours of the vegetable soup, the perfect texture of bread still warm from the ovens, the bright sweetness of sliced peaches. Each taste registered with unusual clarity, another expression of a heightened awareness. After eating, she felt drawn to visit the palace library once more. The rain had lightened to a gentle mist, creating a silvery veil over the landscape as she made her way through quiet corridors. Few people were about at this hour, most engaged in indoor activities throughout the palace, allowing her to move in peaceful solitude. The library welcomed her with its familiar scent of paper, leather and wood polish. Rain light filtered through the high windows, creating pools of soft illumination among the shadowy shelves. The space felt especially peaceful today, as though the rain had washed away any lingering tensions, leaving only tranquil awareness. The princess returned to the alcove where she had found the book of folk tales 2 days earlier. Stories of name and nature still rested on the display table, seeming to wait patiently for her return. She lifted it carefully and carried it to the same window seat, settling among cushions as she opened to where she had left off. Today, a different story caught her attention. The kingdom where everyone forgot their names. She turned to the corresponding page and began to read about a mythical land where, once each generation, all citizens would experience a collective forgetting of their names. For 3 days, the usual designations by which people knew themselves and others would slip away, requiring them to recognize each other by deeper qualities, by the light in their eyes, the sound of their laughter, the unique way they moved through the world. During these 3 days, according to the tale, new insights would emerge. Some would discover that the names they had carried no longer fit who they had become. Others would recognize beloved friends whom they had previously overlooked when focusing only on surface identities. By the dawn of the 4th day, when names returned, the kingdom would have renewed itself. Relationships deepened, understanding expanded, artifice dissolved. The princess read this tale twice, feeling its resonance with her own experience and with what her father had shared about their family's history. Perhaps her individual journey echoed this larger pattern described in the ancient folk tale, a necessary periodic renewal of perception, habitual recognition to allow fresh seeing. She closed the book gently, holding it in her lap as she gazed out at the misty gardens. The rain had nearly stopped now, leaving droplets clinging to every surface, transforming the world into a tapestry of tiny, perfect jewels. This rain-washed clarity seemed yet another reflection of her inner experience, the familiar world revealed anew when seen without the filters of habitual perception. Returning the book to its place on the display table, the princess felt a subtle shift within her awareness. Not the return of her name, not yet, but a sense of completion beginning to form around her experience. The insights gained over these days were integrating, creating a new foundation from which she could move forward, whether her name returned or not. With this sense of approaching completion, she felt drawn to visit the forgotten garden once more. The rain had fully stopped by the time she made her way through the main gardens, though droplets still clung to every leaf and petal, releasing their hold and falling to the earth with quiet persistence. The stone path was damp beneath her feet, occasionally forming small puddles in natural depressions where the water gathered. The wooden door to the enclosed garden opened easily under her hand, revealing the circular space transformed by rain. Colours were deeper, scents more pronounced, the entire garden seeming more vividly itself in this moisture-laden state. The unnamed plants glistened with droplets that caught the emerging sunlight as clouds began to part, creating countless tiny rainbows throughout the garden. The princess moved slowly along the narrow paths, even more aware than before of the unique qualities of each plant, not just their visible features, but the particular way each one received and held the rain, the specific angle at which droplets gathered before falling from their leaves, the unique scent released when water met their surfaces. Reaching the small fountain at the garden's centre, she sat on the stone bench, listening to the harmonious sounds of fountain water and raindrops falling from leaves. The combined music created a soothing rhythm that invited deep relaxation. She closed her eyes, allowing her breathing to synchronize with these gentle sounds. With each inhale, she drew in the rain-fresh air, filling her lungs with its pure, clean essence. With each exhale, she released a little more tension, a little more effort, a little more need to know or understand or control. Her body softened on the stone bench, shoulders dropping, facial muscles relaxing, hands resting open and receptive in her lap. In this deep relaxation, surrounded by unnamed beauty, the princess felt a subtle stirring within her awareness, a gentle unfolding, like a flower opening to morning light. Without effort or seeking, a single word arose in the quiet space of her mind, floating into consciousness with the naturalness of a bubble rising to water's surface. Her name. It returned not with dramatic revelation, but with quiet recognition, like remembering something so fundamental it had never truly been forgotten. The princess opened her eyes, gazing at the rain-jeweled garden around her, feeling how this name now rested differently within her understanding. It was no longer the primary lens through which she knew herself, but rather one aspect of a much larger, more complete identity. A useful designation, but not the essence of who she was. There you are, she whispered to the name that had returned, greeting it like an old friend who had been away on a journey. You've been having an adventure of your own, haven't you? The notion amused her, the idea that her name had needed its own time of freedom, his own experience of existing separately from her before returning with renewed meaning. Perhaps names, like people, sometimes needed space to discover their true significance. Rising from the bench, the princess felt a profound integration taking place within her. The insights of these nameless days flowing together with the returned designation, creating a more complete experience of self than she had known before. She was both the named princess and the nameless awareness that had observed and experienced these days with such clarity. Neither aspect negated the other. Together they formed a more complete whole. With this sense of integration warming her heart, she made her way back through the garden toward the wooden door. Each step felt somehow more fully her own, more completely embodied, as though her physical movement through a space now expressed something more essential about her being. The sun had emerged fully from behind the clouds as she stepped through the doorway, transforming the rain-washed world into a glistening paradise. Light reflected from every wet surface. Leaves, petals, stone paths, distant palace windows, creating an extraordinary brilliance that might have seemed overwhelming if not for the deep peace she carried within. Walking unhurriedly toward the palace, the princess felt gratitude for this journey she had been gifted. This temporary stepping away from familiar identity that had revealed so much about her deeper nature. She understood now what her father had meant about the experience transforming one's relationship with their name rather than simply returning to the previous state. Her name now felt like a beautiful garment she could wear in the world. Useful, meaningful, even precious, but not the entirety of who she was. Beneath this designation, around and beyond it, existed her essential being, the awareness that observed, experienced, and knew itself directly, with or without the convenience of a name. As she neared the palace, she saw her father walking on a terrace overlooking the gardens. He caught sight of her and raised his hand in greeting, a warm smile lighting his face. Even at this distance, she could see something in his expression, a recognition, a knowing that suggested he sensed the completion of her journey. The princess made her way up the stone steps to join him on the terrace, moving with the graceful ease of someone fully at home in their body and being. When she reached him, he studied her face for a moment, his eyes gentle with understanding. "Welcome back," he said simply. She smiled, knowing he referred not to her physical return, but to the completion of her nameless sojourn. "Thank you, Father. It's good to be both gone and here at once." He nodded, clearly understanding the paradox she expressed. "You carry it well," he observed, offering his arm to her. "Shall we walk together? The gardens are especially beautiful after rain." "Yes," she replied, placing her hand on his arm. "I'd like that very much." Together, father and daughter descended the terrace steps and moved into the glistening gardens. Their pace was unhurried, their attention fully present to each moment, each sight and sound and fragrance. Neither felt the need to fill the peaceful silence with unnecessary words. After some time walking the main paths, where they occasionally nodded greetings to gardeners and other palace residents they encountered, the king guided them toward a less frequented section of the grounds. Here, a small stream flowed through more naturally arranged plantings, its surface now slightly higher from the recent rains. They paused on a simple wooden bridge that arched over the stream, leaning slightly on its railing to watch the clear water moving below. Sunlight danced on the rippling surface, creating patterns of light and shadow that never repeated, a continuous flow of new creation. "When I completed my own nameless time," the king said quietly, "I I felt as though I had discovered an inner stream like this one, always flowing, always fresh, yet somehow always itself, regardless of what name might be given to it. He glanced at his daughter. "Did you find something similar?" The princess nodded, watching a leaf that had fallen into the water make its gentle journey downstream. "Yes, though I might have described it as a still point at the centre, the fixed reference around which everything else moves, as Master Celeste might say." She smiled. "Perhaps they're the same thing, just perceived differently." "Indeed," her father agreed. "The same truth seen through different windows." He straightened from the railing, turning slightly to face her. "And now that your name has returned, for I can see in your eyes that it has, how do you find it sits with you?" "Like a beloved instrument that makes beautiful music," she replied, thinking of Lady Lyra's insight, "but is not itself the music." The king's face brightened with appreciation for her response, perfectly expressed. He gestured toward the continuing path that led deeper into the garden. "Shall we continue?" As they resumed walking, the princess felt a deep contentment flowing through her being. The nameless journey had offered its gifts, transforming her understanding in ways that would continue to unfold in the days and years ahead. Her name had Spati returned, bringing with it a renewed appreciation for both the convenience of designation and the freedom of knowing herself beyond any label. The path curved gently through flowering shrubs and beneath the spreading branches of ancient trees, leading eventually to a small clearing where stone benches encircle a simple fountain. This quiet space, visited less frequently than the grander sections of the royal gardens, offered perfect privacy for continued reflection and conversation. The princess and king seated themselves side by side on one of the benches, the soft sound of the fountain creating a soothing backdrop to their quiet presence together. A gentle breeze occasionally passed through the clearing, causing leaves to rustle and carrying the mingled fragrances of rain-washed flowers and earth. "Over the generations," the king said after a comfortable silence, "those in our family who have experienced the nameless time have often discovered some particular insight or understanding that becomes especially important to them afterward. What would you say is yours?" The princess considered this thoughtful question, allowing herself to feel into the deepest learning these days had brought. After a moment, she replied, "I think it's the recognition that identity is both fixed and flowing, like Master Celeste's stars that remain themselves, yet appear differently depending on one's position of observation, or like Lady Lyra's music that exists beyond any particular performance of it." She paused, finding the precise words for this understanding. "I am both the continuous awareness that observes and experiences, and the particular expression of that awareness that moves through time as this person, with this history, this body, this name. Neither alone is the complete truth." Her father nodded with obvious appreciation. "A profound insight, and one that will serve you well throughout your life." He gazed at the flowing water of the fountain, his eyes reflecting its continuous movement. In times of change or challenge, remembering this dual nature of identity provides both stability and flexibility, the still point and the flowing stream. They sat together in the peaceful clearing as afternoon light began to soften toward evening, occasionally sharing observations or insights, but more often simply being present in comfortable silence. Birds called from nearby trees, their songs and sweet in the rain-cleansed air. The breeze continued its gentle movement through leaves and grasses, creating a soft, continuous whisper. After some time in this tranquil space, the king rose from the bench, offering his hand to his daughter. "We should return to the palace before evening falls completely. Tonight might be a good time for quieter activities, perhaps reading or music in the family chambers rather than more formal engagements." "That sounds perfect," the princess agreed, taking his hand and rising to stand beside him. The simple contact, her hand in his, carried a deeper meaning after these days of heightened awareness. The human connection it represented more fully appreciated. They made their way back along garden paths, now gilded with the golden light of approaching sunset. The world seemed to glow from within, each leaf and flower illuminated with extraordinary clarity. The princess moved through this radiant landscape with a profound sense of belonging. Belonging not just to her royal family or kingdom, but to existence itself, to the continuous unfolding of life in all its forms. As they neared the palace, its white stone walls warmed to amber by the setting sun, the princess felt the journey of these past days settling into her, being like a precious treasure carefully placed in a protected space. The experience would continue to offer its insights in the days and years ahead, a touchstone she could return to whenever she needed to remember the deeper nature that existed beyond name and form. The nameless sojourn had shown her that while losing one's familiar identity might initially seem disconcerting, it actually offered a rare opportunity. The chance to recognize that what remains when designation departs is not emptiness, but fullness, not confusion, but clarity, not loss, but the discovery of something more essential than any name could ever capture. With this understanding illuminating her heart, the princess walked beside her father into the palace, ready to continue her life's journey with both the useful reference of her returned name and the boundless freedom of knowing herself beyond it. The princess who had lost her name and found something far more precious in its place. Evening settled gently over the kingdom of Albaska, stars appearing one by one in the deepening blue of the sky. Within the palace, lamps and candles were lit, creating islands of warm golden light in the gathering darkness. The princess sat in a comfortable chair near the hearth in her father's private study, a book open but unread in her lap. The king himself was seated opposite her, similarly at rest, his attention drawn to the dancing flames in the fireplace between them. This quiet space, lined with bookshelves and adorned with maps of the kingdom, had been a favourite retreat throughout her childhood. Here, away from the formalities of court life, father and daughter had shared countless hours of reading, conversation and comfortable silence. Tonight, it offered the perfect sanctuary for the completion of a remarkable journey. Mayawatha fire crackled softly, releasing the fragrance of applewood into the air. Outside the windows, a gentle evening breeze moved through the gardens, carrying the sweet scent of night-blooming flowers. The princess drew a deep breath, filling her lungs with these mingled fragrances, feeling how fully present she was to this moment, this place, this experience of simply being. Her body felt wonderfully heavy against the cushioned chair, muscles relaxed and at ease after the walking and experiences of the day. Her breathing had found a natural, unhurried rhythm that synchronized with the subtle sounds around her. The occasional pop from the fire, the distant calls of evening birds, the barely perceptible turning of pages as her father picked up his own book and began to read. This peaceful state allowed her mind to gently review the journey of these past days. The initial discovery of her name's absence, the conversations with Master Thorn in the garden, Master Celeste in the observatory, and Lady Lyra in the music room. Each encounter had offered unique insights that expanded her understanding of identity and perception. The forgotten garden with its unnamed plants had shown her the beauty of existence without designation, while her father's guidance had provided context and reassurance throughout the experience. Now, with her name returned, but transformed in its relationship to her sense of self, the princess felt a profound integration taking place within her being. The lessons of these nameless days were settling into her understanding, creating new foundations from which she would move forward into whatever adventures awaited in the future. Her eyes grew heavy as she gazed into the fire, its warm light creating a gentle, hypnotic effect that invited deeper relaxation. She felt no need to resist this natural movement toward rest. The book in her lap was gently closed and set aside, her head finding a comfortable position against the chair's high back. The king noticed his daughter's deepening relaxation, but made no comment, allowing her to follow this natural progression without interruption. He simply continued his quiet reading, his presence a comforting anchor in the room as she drifted toward the borders of sleep. In this twilight state between waking and dreaming, the princess experienced once more the sensory richness that had characterized her nameless days. The soft weight of her body against the chair, the gentle sound of crackling flames, the complex fragrances of wood smoke and leather-bound books, the play of firelight against her closed eyelids. Each sensation registered with crystalline clarity, yet without creating any disturbance to her deepening peace. As her awareness continued to soften, she found herself revisiting the various settings of her journey. The misty morning gardens where she had first noticed her name's absence, the grand library with its ancient volumes of wisdom, the royal observatory with its celestial models and perspectives, the music room where she had experienced transparent playing, and most vividly, the forgotten garden where unnamed beauty had flourished in perfect harmony. These places appeared in her mind's eye with extraordinary detail, not as mere memories, but as living environments that she moved through once more, experiencing their beauty and lessons with renewed appreciation. In the gentle rhythm of her breathing, these scenes flowed one into another, creating a continuous landscape of discovery and insight. Her body grew increasingly heavy against the chair, muscles releasing any remaining tension, breath deepening and slowing to the natural pace of approaching sleep. Distantly, she was aware of her father rising quietly from his chair, approaching to place a light blanket over her, his gentle hand briefly resting on her shoulder before he withdrew to allow her rest to deepen undisturbed. The crackling of the fire continued its soothing music, flames gradually subsiding to a gentler glow as logs burned down to embers. This transition from active flame to steady warmth paralleled the princess's own movement from waking awareness to the peaceful borderlands of sleep, where consciousness remained, but in a more diffuse, dreamlike form. In this liminal space, she experienced once more the central insight of her journey, the recognition that beneath name and form, beyond all designation and identification, existed a continuous awareness that was both intimately herself and somehow larger than any personal identity could encompass. This awareness, like the still point at the center of rotating stars or the silent space that allows music to exist was the ground of her being, the essence that remained when all else fell away. The understanding flowed through her like warm honey, sweet and nourishing, bringing a smile to her lips even as sleep drew nearer. Her breathing slowed further, each exhale releasing her more completely into rest, each inhale bringing fresh peace to body and mind alike. As sleep finally embraced her fully, the princess carried with her the precious gifts of her nameless journey, not as concepts to be remembered, but as wisdom now integrated into the very fabric of her being. These insights would continue their quiet work of transformation, even as she rested, preparing her to awaken renewed, with both her familiar identity and her deeper nature in more perfect harmony than before. Throughout the night, she slept peacefully in the comfortable chair, watched over by the gentle glow of embers in the hearth. Her dreams were filled with stars and unnamed flowers, with music that played itself, and gardens where every plant was, perfectly itself without need for designation. These dreams were not separate from her waking insights, but rather their continuation in another form, the same wisdom expressing itself through the language of sleep. When morning finally arrived, sunlight gradually filling the study with its golden presence, the princess awakened slowly, naturally, with no abruptness or disorientation. Her eyes opened to the familiar room transformed by morning light, her body feeling wonderfully rested despite having slept in a chair rather than her bed. She stretched gently, feeling the pleasant release in her muscles, the natural expansion of her lungs as she drew in the fresh morning air. With this physical awakening came a clear recognition. The journey was complete. She had lost her name and found it again, but more importantly, she had discovered what existed beyond any name, the continuous presence that remained regardless of designation. Rising from the chair, the blanket her father had placed over her falling softly around her, the princess moved to the window to gaze out at the morning gardens. The world sparkled with dew, each droplet catching the light like a perfect jewel. Birds were already active, their songs filling the air with natural music. The day awaited, fresh and new, ready to be experienced with the heightened awareness her journey had awakened. With deep gratitude for all she had been given through this experience, the princess turned from the window, ready to step forward into this new day, carrying both her name and the freedom that comes from knowing herself beyond it, a harmony of identity that would guide her through all the adventures yet to come in the peaceful kingdom of Albaska. Allow yourself now to drift even deeper into relaxation as we return to some of the most peaceful moments from our journey. Remember the forgotten garden, where unnamed flowers thrived in perfect harmony, their beauty complete without any designation. Feel yourself there once more, seated on the stone bench near the central fountain, listening to the gentle sound of water flowing over smooth stones. The air around you is fresh and cool after rain, carrying the complex fragrance of wet earth and countless blossoms. Droplets cling to leaves and petals, occasionally releasing their hold to fall with soft, musical sounds to the ground below. Sunlight filters through the leafy canopy above, creating patterns of light and shadow that shift with each gentle breeze. Your body feels wonderfully heavy on the stone bench, supported completely, requiring no effort to maintain its position. Your breathing finds its own natural rhythm, synchronized with the bubbling of the fountain. With each inhale, resting in awareness itself, beneath all names and identifications. You need not try to reach this state. It is already here, already your most natural condition, revealed whenever you allow yourself to simply be without striving or seeking. Feel the weight of your body becoming heavier, more relaxed with each breath, your shoulders softening, releasing any held tension, your facial muscles smooth and at ease, jaw relaxed, forehead unwrinkled, your hands and arms feeling pleasantly warm and heavy, resting completely, your legs and feet becoming increasingly relaxed, as though gently sinking into the surface that supports them. In this deep physical relaxation, mental quietude naturally emerges. Thoughts may still arise like bubbles in a calm pond, but they no longer demand your attention or engagement. They simply appear and dissolve while you remain in the peaceful center, observing without attachment, experiencing without effort. Return now to the Royal Observatory with its painted ceiling of stars and constellations. Recall the celestial compass that indicates direction, not through magnetic forces, but through consistent patterns in the night sky. Like this compass, you have within you a natural guidance system that always knows your true direction, always recognizes what is essential beneath the changing appearances of daily life. Feel yourself growing even heavier, even more relaxed as you contemplate the vast, peaceful cosmos represented in the observatory. The stars in their courses move with perfect harmony, each following its natural path without resistance or struggle. Your own being can flow with this same natural ease, moving through life's experiences with presence and grace, without unnecessary effort or strain. Your breathing continues its gentle rhythm, becoming slower and deeper as relaxation increases. Each exhale releases you more completely into rest. Each inhale brings fresh peace to body and mind. You are safe, comfortable, and perfectly at ease as our journey continues to guide you toward deep, restorative sleep. Now, find yourself once more in the music room, where transparent playing revealed how music flows through us when we step aside from performing or controlling. Remember how the simple wooden flute produced pure, clear notes when played without personal signature or effort. Your own consciousness can experience this same transparency, this same direct communion with life, when you allow yourself to rest in present awareness, rather than continuous doing or achieving. Feel a wave of relaxation flowing through your entire body now, from the crown of your head to the tips of your toes. Each muscle group softens and releases, creating a sensation of pleasant heaviness and warmth. Your breathing continues its natural rhythm, requiring no control or adjustment from you. Simply allow it to flow, bringing oxygen to every cell, carrying away any remaining tension with each exhale. Like the unnamed plants in the forgotten garden, you are perfectly complete, just as you are in this moment. Nothing needs to be added or taken away. No effort is required. You can simply rest in being itself, allowing sleep to approach at its own perfect pace, in its own natural timing. As our story draws towards its conclusion, imagine yourself in the king's study, seated in a comfortable chair before a gently crackling fire. The room is warm and peaceful, lined with books and filled with the soft golden light of evening. Your body feels wonderfully heavy against the cushions, supported completely, requiring no effort to maintain its position. The fire's gentle movement creates a hypnotic effect, inviting you to release any remaining alertness. to surrender completely into rest. Your eyelids grow heavier with each passing moment. Your breathing slows naturally. Your awareness begins to soften around the edges, preparing for the transition into sleep. This journey we've shared, like the princess's nameless sojourn, offers its gifts most fully when you allow yourself to receive them without striving. The wisdom revealed continues its quiet work of integration even as you rest, requiring nothing from your conscious mind. You can release all effort now, all doing, all seeking, and simply allow yourself to be carried gently toward deep, peaceful sleep. As we enter the final phase of our journey together, allow your awareness to grow even softer, even more diffuse. The story we've shared becomes like a gentle current carrying you toward sleep's welcoming shores. You need not hold on to any part of it. Its essence continues to work within you even as details fade from conscious awareness. Return once more to the forgotten garden where unnamed beauty thrives in perfect harmony. The stone bench supports you completely as you listen to the fountain's gentle music. Droplets of water catch the light, creating countless tiny rainbows throughout the garden. With each breath, you draw in the garden's fresh, fragrant air, exhaling any remaining tension or effort. Your body feels increasingly heavy, increasingly warm. Your muscles release completely, creating a sensation of pleasant sinking into the surface that supports you. Your breathing continues its slow, steady rhythm, in and out, rise and fall, requiring no effort or control. Each inhale brings peaceful energy to every cell of your body. Feel the gentle expansion of your chest as air flows effortlessly into your lungs. Each exhale carries away any remaining tension, any unnecessary holding. Feel the release, the letting go that happens naturally with each breath out. The garden around you grows increasingly dreamlike, its colours softening, its outlines becoming less distinct. Your awareness gently expands, becoming less focused, more diffuse. Like the princess who discovered the freedom beyond names, you too can rest in the spacious awareness that exists beneath all identification and effort. Your breathing continues its gentle rhythm, growing slower and deeper as sleep draws nearer. Your heartbeat slows to match this peaceful pace, creating a soothing harmony within your physical form. Your body temperature finds its perfect balance, neither too warm nor too cool, ideal for the transition into deep, restful sleep. Allow yourself to sink even deeper into relaxation now, releasing any remaining effort to stay alert or attentive. The journey continues without requiring your conscious participation. Sleep approaches like a gentle wave, ready to carry you into its peaceful depths whenever you're ready to release completely. Feel the heaviness in your eyelids, the comfortable weight of your limbs, the quiet slowing of your thought processes. Every system in your body prepares for rest, shifting naturally from the activity of wakefulness to the restoration of sleep. You are completely safe, completely supported, able to surrender fully to this natural transition. Like the peaceful kingdom of Albaska, your sleeping mind will be a place of gentle discovery and renewal. Dreams may come, offering their own wisdom in the language of images and feelings, or you may simply rest in the deep, quiet darkness of dreamless sleep. Either way, your body and mind receive exactly the restoration they need. The unnamed flowers in the forgotten garden continue their quiet blooming as your awareness grows increasingly diffuse. The fountain's gentle music becomes your lullaby, its continuous continuous flow, a reminder of life's constant renewal. The stone bench supports you completely as you sink deeper into relaxation, deeper into peace, deeper into the welcoming embrace of sleep. You're breathing so slow now, so deep, carrying you effortlessly toward rest. Your heartbeat quiet and steady, creating a gentle rhythm that soothes and comforts. Your body heavy and warm, perfectly prepared for sleep's healing embrace. Your mind peaceful and quiet, releasing all need to think or plan or solve. You can let go completely now. No effort is needed. Sleep is already here, already welcoming you into its peaceful realm. Like the princess who found completion in her journey, you too are arriving at the perfect conclusion to our time together. The deep, restful sleep that renews and restores. Rest now. Sleep deeply. All is well. Thank you for sharing this journey. Good night. you.